Hello, this is David Rovix with a song for today. On June 3rd, 1839, Chinese troops burned 20,000 crates of British opium, leading to Britain initiating a trade war of aggression. It became known as the First Opium War. The purpose of it was to force China to import an addictive drug in order to allow the British Empire to profit off of the misery of the Chinese people. This has always been the kind of imperialism that colonial powers such as Britain, France, and the United States like to call free trade. There was nothing exceptional about the Opium Wars. They're just a slightly more stark example than most of the basic modus operandi of the foreign policy of the imperialist Western nations of the day.
Let me tell you a tale, stir a hornet's nest, well remembered in the East, most forgotten in the West. It was the 1830s, and the Industrial Revolution was turning Europe into a land of wage slaves and air pollution. The history books tell us it was the era of free trade, and the entire world hungered for the products Europe made. Merchants plied their wares across the 7 seas, and they brought back things like porcelain, silk, and tea. Soon all the tea in China could barely keep the West awake. Such a thirst for Chinese products as could barely be slaked. They liked to drink their tea in cups of Chinese porcelain, and those who could afford it loved the silk upon their skin. But what made the merchants and the monarchs scream and cry and shout? They seemed to have little to offer that China could live without. They didn't want their muskets and they didn't want their wool, which left the British coffers empty and the Chinese coffers full. And they called it a trade war. They called it a trade war, and I guess that could be so. They say it's not free trade if it's just a one-way flow, because apparently free trade is when the West comes out ahead. That's how it is in practice, though that's never what is said. The fact of history they'd have a sweep under the rug. The one thing they could sell in China was an addictive drug. It had long been banned by Chinese law, but the British didn't care. They packed the opium up in crates and they shipped it there. And they called it a trade war. It all came to a head in 1838. When the soldiers of the emperor torched 20,000 crates. It took 3 days to burn it, and when the fires had gone out, the Chinese people would soon learn what free trade was all about. Navies came from Britain, France, and the USA. In blood, land, and silver they would make the Chinese pay. Cities leveled, thousands killed. The war was 3 years long. That's how they opened China. That's how they got Hong Kong. And they called it a trade war. And they called it a trade war. And they called it a trade war.
This has been a song for today. You can hear past episodes and subscribe to the podcast by searching for Song for Today on the podcasting platform of your choice. I also put out a longer weekly podcast by Friday every week, an audio essay, which you can find by searching in your podcasting app for This Week with David Rovix or by visiting davidrovix.com.